What is up, fight fans? Jordan Kurtz here with the MMA plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We are coming to you live from the number 38 presented by Volo and the Vmos app. You can check them out today, see everything that's offered by the Vmos app. Also, come down here to the number 38, check out some games, check out everything that Mile High Sports has to offer. Lots of merch, things along those lines available out here for you. But without further ado, let's ride right into the top of things here, giving you a rundown from around the sports world. Again, got to give a shout out to the Mile High Sports crew out there, giving you the latest and greatest on all things within the core four. But got to start off by hitting this last weekend was the Super Bowl. And, to be honest, because we had Combat Club earlier that day, didn't exactly or wasn't the most attentive for the Super Bowl. Also, still a little bit of sour grapes or a bad taste in my mouth from the AFC Championship. That game sucked. Like, it was boring. There wasn't a whole lot of high points. It was just basically the Seattle Seahawks playing bully ball against the Patriots for as much of what I could see. There was a whole controversy of things with the halftime show that I think both sides or both ends of people got way too into or way too much of an argument. Well, on one end, you could say, yeah, there's the whole different language aspect. Well, were you complaining, though, when it was J-Lo and Shakira? I mean, granted, I wasn't complaining because those are two just hot broads to be able to look at in the process. You could say, oh, well, when you translate the lyrical content, that might be an issue. Well, yeah, again, another criticism where I could see, but did you take issue when it was Rihanna? When it was Lady Gaga, 50 Cent, Eminem, Dr. Dre, The Weeknd? Like, you could make these arguments against a lot of different artists that they've had throughout the years. There's never going to be anybody that is a complete solve or a happy choice for everybody, or someone that you can never find some sort of controversy with. So I guess my message here is, why not just enjoy the entertainment for what it is? And what happened to the days of, if you didn't like it, you just don't watch it, or you just don't give it attention and you keep it moving forward? Like, yeah, the game might still be on, and while that's playing in the background, that's when you go hit a porcelain break. You go BS with the boys for a little bit outside over a dart or something. What happened to those days? What happened to where everything had to be a demonstration? Like, why does that have to be the case? Like, just keep it moving. But like that, I will keep it moving. It's going to be 7 long months with no football, though. I'll tell you that much. It's going to be an interesting Sunday night session at Texas Roadhouse for the next couple of months. In the NHL, you have the Avalanche. They've cooled off from the pretty intense, fast-paced start that they had at the beginning of the year. They're still the points leader, but there are some teams catching up to them as far as the points and the win column goes. You have the Nuggets that are treading water right now, going 500 over the last 10. They're definitely dealing with some injuries, but it's All-Star weekend. So, fellas, your girl's going to LA this weekend. She's not really your girl. Plain and simple. Enough said. In the major leagues, you have pitchers and catchers reporting to facilities this week. It was also just announced over the last few days that the Rockies will host Team USA on March 4th in an exhibition game. This game is going to serve as a tune-up for Team USA before Pool B play begins for the World Baseball Classic Tournament. Make sure that you check out the Mile High Sports crew wherever possible, whether that's on the internet, the podcast side of things, socials, YouTube. Smash like, share, and subscribe wherever it is possible there. Moving along to the Colorado Rundown. As always, guys, if you have the opportunity to buy tickets directly from the fighters, please do. It definitely helps them with their commission. If you buy paper tickets in person, it's going to save you a couple of bucks of online and processing fees. Also, even when you're just watching from afar and picking up the stream, you could still put somebody in that promo code slot, and it's going to give them commission toward their totals. So that would be greatly appreciated. Couple of weeks off, as this last couple of weeks had multiple shows across multiple promotions. Coming up in March, though, there are going to be a few shows going on. You have on March 7th, Battle MMA Championship going down in Colorado Springs. You have the 5280 Muay Thai Fight Series, Colorado's only all Muay Thai exclusive promotion, going down on the 21st. That's going to be a Muay Thai matinee at the Stampede. Following that up to round the month off, you have Colorado Combat Club 28 going down. I believe there's also an airtight boxing show that's happening that same weekend. So your support is greatly appreciated at any one of these events. We are certainly grateful for all of the engagement that we get, whether that is you showing up there in person or all of those engagements on the social posts, the likes, the shares, the mentions, the comments, the engagement, all of that matters for us. So we are greatly appreciative of you for your following and your fellowship there. Transitioning into the weekend recap, going to talk a couple of different shows here that happened over the weekend. You had BKFC. Going to talk a couple of times about BKFC, but the big takeaway from this show was that the Pitbull Andre Arlovsky is still finding ways to get it done. Now, 6 years ago, when we first started this show, when Ron Kruk was still on board with us, Ron talked about how in his days of Inside MMA, 10 years prior, about how he thought that it was about to be the end of the road for Andre the Pitbull Arlovsky. Well, at 47 years old, also after whipping cancer's ass 3 times, Andre Arlovsky goes out there and wins the BKFC heavyweight championship. 47 years old, still going out there and putting it on, guys. Takes the strap off of Big Ben Rothwell. And a couple of weeks back, beat the hell out of a bunch of streamers. That little broccoli top, what the hell is his name? Jack, whatever that knucklehead's name is that you always see making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Love to
Doherty,
see
I think.
Yeah, Jack
Big
Doherty.
time loser.
Yeah. That jackass. But Andre Arlovsky, he even challenged multiple of those guys at once to fight. Like, hey, like you guys want to make this a thing and run it up? Like, please, you want to say that, oh, your security guard, your big fat ass security guard who couldn't whip himself out of a wet paper bag against somebody like Andre Arlovsky. He's just a large human that allows you to go be this little internet douchebag everywhere that you go. No, I would have loved to have seen that, but this is a much more meritocratic based achievement, winning a world championship for BKFC. But now maybe, that fight's out there on the table and he can go get a bag from those internet knuckleheads. But moving along from that, on the card, you also had Charles Crazy Horse, or depending on when you started following combat sports, now more known as Felony Bennett. He's a guy who's been around since the Pride era as well. Famously knocked out Vanderlei Silva backstage in a brawl that happened at a Pride show. This, again, somebody who has figured out a way to keep eyes on him for years and years, went on a crazy losing streak, but has now won a couple of fights in the last couple of years. So interesting, just definitely interesting between the guys out there. Then moving along to, let's see, it looks like we got someone who came in on the chat. What's that say? Imagine if active heavyweight boxer.
I don't know. It doesn't have a name, but if an active heavyweight boxer joined BKFC,
he would clean up. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of guys who would go out there and clean up in BKFC, but there is also something to be said. It is a different game. It doesn't directly translate from traditional boxing, though somebody with a high level of traditional boxing experience would absolutely have success. But there's certain things that maybe as a heavyweight that you get by with big gloves that you would have to learn a way to work around when it comes to the bare knuckle skill set. With bare knuckle, there's a lot more risk when it comes to injuring and breaking your hands. You got to worry about clipping elbows, what part of the head you're making contact with, and things of that nature. So yeah, I do believe that you would have any one of these top ranked heavyweights go out there and be able to have success, but to what degree, that's ultimately gonna, that would have to materialize from the stylistic matchups themselves, because you do have some guys who, Andre Arlovsky, he's been striking at a very high level for a long time. But yeah, if you take someone who's in their prime, then yeah, you would have to think that somebody would be able to beat a 47-year-old. So I don't totally disagree with you in that comment. Moving along to CJJC, we had the CJJC 29 annual Grapple Bowl card that went down on Saturday. It's been a fixture within the CJJC world now. We've had multiple Grapple Bowl cards. There's been a high turnout and great matchups for each of those so far. Now, in the main event, we had an IBJJF world champion in Artur Bichanov, who he went out there and he won by a Darce choke. definitely an entertaining performance by him. You had D'Anthony, the Ace Muniz out of New Era Jiu-Jitsu. We spoke about how D'Anthony has been a frequentor of the competition scene across various different formats, different rule sets, and has something lined up here in the near future for himself as well. Well, it was a matchup that he should have went out there, showed up, showed out, and he delivered upon all expectations. Got a first-round armbar victory and took that thing home with him. So congratulations to D'Anthony, the Ace Muniz out of New Era Jiu-Jitsu. Also got to always give a shout-out to my man, Professor Matt Sierra. Such a great person. Just not even the work that he does for his athletes and him cleaning up on the card, but just him being a good dude. Shout out to Professor Matt Sierra. You had Josiah the Ghost Garcia back on the card, back like he never left. How many times do you have to have a signature submission before it becomes your move? Well, when we're taking a look at Josiah the Ghost Garcia, this kid has close to now 20 tech subs by a baseball bat choke alone. He added another tech sub to his resume the other day against a tough guy who comes from a respected camp. And yeah, I mean, right from the outset, Trevor O'Connor and I on the broadcast call said this kid is always looking for a baseball bat choke. It's kind of something that you can almost, schedule and prepare for if you're any opponent out there. And within seconds into the scrap, well, he finds his grips, finds the lapels, finds the collars, starts to get to the side, and, well, opponent is asleep. So Josiah the Ghost Garcia, like I say, this kid is he's got a lot of sauce. He's got a lot of great energy about him. He's got golden retriever type of energy. As soon as he hopped on the mic afterwards, he's giving everybody under the sun shout outs. He's loving life. That's just one of those kids that you have to love having on a card because he brings it, and the energy, just the aura factor that he has, that he brings to the cage. You had Ace Fletcher out of Onyx Jiu-Jitsu, who picked up a win herself. This was a great performance, a fantastic performance for her to go out there and show off herself very well and be able to just highlight the work that so many of those athletes over at Onyx under the tutelage of Isaiah and Jesse Wright are doing. You had Kyle the Cobra Kirk picking up a win in the, this was, like I say, a fun day Josiah took on Kyle Kirk. Moving along from that, you had Zeke Alirez, who this was Zeke's first step back into competition after Zeke had been away for some injuries. Zeke went out there and he had to answer some questions for himself. He had to be able to make that walk again, hit the curtains, feel the lights, smell the smells, walk up those steps and enter that cage door. And he's going to be back in the MMA scene before we know it. But this was that first step back after considerable knee surgery and some time away for him to just get back into the swing of things. So congratulations to him. Then you had a matchup with Samantha Sparks of Evergreen Jiu-Jitsu, who had a hard-fought win over Alexa Johnson. This was a back-and-forth scrap between these two ladies that went all the way to the final bell. Great showing for both of them. Couple of matchups on the undercard to highlight. You had Jesse Fabiano out of New Era Jiu-Jitsu. This is a young man who we're watching grow from a boy to a man before our eyes in the CJJC cage. He's one of these teenage grapplers who he's starting to physically mature a little bit. And we've seen him rise a couple of weight classes in the process just from natural growth. And as this kid continues to develop physically, it's only going to accent what he already knows or what he has the acumen for from the mental end of the game. There's just certain stuff that, you need a little bit of man muscle to be able to pull off on some of the higher levels or certain positions, certain breaks of locks or grips and so on and so forth that come with just a little bit of strength and leverage. Well, as this kid continues to grow into himself, watch out, because he is a thoroughbred when it comes to his skill set and what the potential he brings to the grappling world. Also, want to give a shout out to George Venzer. George Venzer went out there and got a victory by rear naked choke in overtime. Couple of trips that he's had to the CJJC cage. This one was finally the one where he was able to get that hard fought victory, get that sweet taste of victory, if you will. Then another one that I want to give a shout out to is Olivia Romero. Olivia Romero out of Says MMA. She's got an MMA fight also on the schedule here in the near future, but that's somebody who just has an unrelenting competitive spirit. She's been competing across multiple different combat sports disciplines over the course of the last couple of years now, is a frequent tour of the scene, is a great athlete to work with behind the scenes. So got to give a shout out to Olivia as well. But moving along from that, we want to now break down the Colorado Combat Club card. Over the weekend, we had Colorado Combat Club 28. This was a fun show. Again, obviously not necessarily the most ideal circumstances in terms of date, being that it was on Super Bowl Sunday, but we gave you a high quality, high entertaining, high octane show to be able to account for that. In the main event, you had a split decision victory for our friend of the program in Justin J. Train Gonzalez. He took on Darian Robinson. Now, I'm not exactly sure where the split decision came into play, being completely objective. I do think that Darian absolutely won the second round. He had a knockdown in that round, but I thought that J Train won 1 and 3 pretty definitively, personally. I think that there were some frustrations that Darian allowed to factor into his performance. He had visible frustration and just moments where you could see that the wrestling or the cage control from J Train was bothering him, had him rattled. It's tough, but it is MMA, and you're dealing with a guy who went out there with a game plan that we've seen basically throughout a large portion of Justin's career, where the wrestling and the wall work is going to be a considerable portion of his agenda. That's going to be what you're going to see from him a lot. Well, that's on you then to be able to equip yourself with the tools and the tactics to be able to get your back off of the fence, to be able to stay in space. That's not throwing body kicks when you're in close range for them to be able to be caught and wrapped up for a single leg or be used for a fit in. That's all some things that can be addressed from an actual X's and O's standpoint, that I just think that you have to take that back to the drawing board and be better for the next time. Darian still has the opportunity to absolutely go make a run for the big show. He's on the better side of 30. I believe he's in his late 20s still. He still has a great record intact. What does that put for J Train? I'm not sure where J Train, where his next fight is going to be, whether that's going to be for us, whether that gets him an opportunity on a different stage. I do know that J Train is going to take a little bit of time off. Congratulations to him and his family. They're expecting their first child here in the next few weeks. He's in the process of doing some education things away from the cage. So, I expect that it'll probably be, a late summer, potential fall situation where we see J Train back. But just want to give him and his family a big kudos and a shout out for everything that they have going and what's on the horizon for them as they start their family. In the co-main event, we had another friend of the program in the King, Connor Leonard, following up on his 2025 Fight of the Year performance as he took on Rob Fuller. Rob Fuller was a late replacement going in there for Hussam El Khazri. Rob Fuller came out there and he tried to bring a fight to Connor Leonard right away. Sprinted across the cage at him and tried to just make it a nasty, mean brawl, which that's probably the only way that Rob would have had a chance at a victory against Connor was to make it, for lack of a better term, and I don't mean dirty in a sense of ethics, but to make it dirty, to make it grimy, to make it a brawl. And hopefully in this firefight of swinging wild haymakers, he would find that shot. Well, for Rob, that didn't happen. For Connor, it did. It was a 40-second melee, and Connor ends up flatlining Rob, or puts him flat on his back, then finishes up with ground and pound. Connor Leonard is just one of those kids who he's got an it factor about him. The kid has pop and power. He's willing to go brawl it out if he needs to. He does have technical aspects to his game, but he's just been in a couple of fights in his last couple of pro outings that it's gotten to be a little bit more of a dogfight. Or when you have someone who just basically sprints at you, well, you got to engage a little bit and put that dog down. And that's exactly what Connor did. I think that his next fight, he was saying that he's got something lined up here sometime maybe late springish. I just hope that he is able to maintain activity. I hope that the kid is able to keep getting matchups and keep being able to show off the skill set that he has, because I do see the potential for him to have an opportunity at the next level. There's a few really good fighters that are within that same tier those, 5 fights and under, if you will, professional tier in Colorado at 145 pounds, that you also have some great matchups that they could maybe go run it. You have the chance that maybe that circles back with Hussam El Khazri. I don't know if Connor's lost confidence in that potential matchup, but there's also our fighter of the year last year and Elias Rodriguez. There's Samuel Henriquez, who's out there in this same tier. Once Bobby Zfriend is able to return from his layoff from the injuries, that could be a potential option that's out there. There's a few guys at 145 who could be some fun opportunities for him here, but there's also a lot of opportunities and matchups that could help grow his pipeline and his platform elsewhere. So whatever it is for Connor Leonard, I wish nothing best but the best for the kid. Tremendous athlete to work with. And for as long as we have him on the Colorado scene, go out there and watch him fight, because this kid's going to put on a show for you. He understands it. Moving along from him, we had another friend of the program. We had Miguel Barrientos with the first round TKO. Miguel, it was all him from the very beginning. The very first leg kick that he threw at Chitwood, you could tell that Chitwood was feeling it. He had to switch stances right away. Then he was standing on a wobbly leg. Miguel just pressed the action right away as soon as he smelt blood in the water and pounced on the finish immediately. You had Jordan Miles defeat Tyree Woolfork. Now, Jordan Miles, unfortunately, did not make weight for this fight, so he ended up not being eligible to win the title. So he is now still next in line to fight for that title in the next couple of months. We have our March and our April cards for Combat Club. It's up in the air what date that one might be, but we're still looking at that situation and scenario of Jordan Miles facing Lorenzo Grigio for that next opportunity for the 155 belt. Then you had a fight between Joe Leal and Quadra Husseini. Hey, I was impressed by Joe Leal. Joe Leal went out there and brought the fight. Quadra is a kid who typically he's at his best when he's moving downhill. He's at his best when he's firing offensively and when he's driving the show. But Joe was in his grill the entire time. Joe didn't allow for Quadra to start to find a rhythm and to get into his flow. And I think that played games with the rhythm of Quadra in the process. But I do know that Quadra, he's a young, hungry kid. He's got a great staff behind him. I love Tanner Fuji, one of his main coaches over there at High Altitude. He's going to be back. He's 19 years old. He's got some things to work on and some opportunities to grow with. But I do think that in the long run, this kid will bounce back, and he's going to be someone who we see on the scene for quite a long time. We had some heavyweight action between Nerman Kozik and Luis Lopez. Now, this one drew some controversy in the crowd, and that was just simply because this got read off wrong. Straight up. There's no other way to put it. Once they initially gave the announcement in the cage and it got read off by our in-ring announcer, they announced Luis Lopez as the winner. It was a close fight. It was a fight that you could have said a 29-28 for either fighter. I think that 30-27 for either guy was absolutely absurd. But there were two 30-27 cards somehow. I personally scored the fight for Luis. So did my broadcast partner, Art Petrosian, on our unofficial cards. However, again, it was a close fight that you could have made the case for either guy. A 29-28 fight for either person. When the announcement or when the correction came in, man, I thought we were about to see chairs flying. Thought we were about to see some cups all over the place. Fortunately, the crowd didn't go as wild as they could have. Certainly a lot of boos, a lot of controversy. Nerman throughout his post-fight interview, unfortunately, kind of got booed out. You couldn't really hear him as much over the house audio as the people who were voicing their displeasure. If it would have been just announced Nerm being the victor right away, I don't think you have the outcry. But because it was a tough fight, it was a very close fight, and you had one person already get announced the winner who did have a considerable crowd there, well, all of their people just got extremely pissed off that they feel like the rug was taken from under their feet. So nobody wanted to take the blame for it. You had the commission blaming the announcers. You had the announcer blaming the commission, and nobody wanted to own up to it. or who made the mistake initially or where the breakdown in communication was. Make that for what you will, but it certainly didn't help the case at all. Moving from that, you had Vic Rangel, who is a young man out of Catalyst Jiu-Jitsu up there in Northern Colorado. He's a training partner of Conor Leonard. This kid is somebody that you need to keep your eyes on. You know, this was the longest fight so far that he's had. It went all the way to the cards, but it was a pretty dominant performance. You know, I think that, again, this is a young kid with a bright future out there. William Henry picked up an armbar victory over Adam Gao. Fast start, ends up picking up the finish right away in the second round. Yeah, this is a kid who he's had to go through a little bit of adversity early on in his MMA career and then was able to go out there and get a big finish. So shout out to the Says MMA crew for that one. And then opening up the day, another guy from Says, Brett Fogelberg, picked up a TKO victory to open up the card. Now going to run through just a couple of fights from the UFC. Or actually, Danny, let's hit that break real quick and then we'll come back and recap the UFC.
With millions of page views every year, ColoradoPreps.com is the #1 source for the high school sports community to keep up with the latest news and scores. From football and volleyball to basketball and softball, ColoradoPreps.com provides a year-round hub for coaches, friends, and family to stay connected to their favorite schools and athletes, and keep an eye on their rivals. Covering high school sports from the peaks to the plains, you always get the latest at ColoradoPreps.com.
So many bills, like I can't even afford charcuterie.
No summer vacation. That's a thing. The worst? Talking on the phone with my voice like an animal.
Adulting is hard. Hooters is easy. All the games, all the wings, all the beers, all season. No worries. Hooters.
Welcome back to the MMA Plug, presented to you by Mile High Sports. We're coming to you live from the number 38, presented by Volo and the Vimos app. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram and Threads. Give me a follow on TikTok at the Peanut Gallery MMA. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards, holding it down for me as always. We're going to recap this last weekend's action in the UFC. You had the first Fight Night card at the Apex, and man, I think that it was a great show. You know, you're seeing some of the improvements that they're making to that facility overall. They've added more seats, more of a crowd in there. There's going to be another show happening there this week for boxing. Talk a little bit more about that coming up. But in this main event, you know, we spoke to it a little bit last week with Mario Bautista and the Vinicius Oliveira matchup, that this could very well be a situation where we see a levels statement. And that was the case for a couple of the bouts on this card. You saw that from Mario Bautista, who it was all him. You saw a couple of storms and bursts from Vinicius early on, but you know, Vinicius is a really large bantamweight already. How much does that weight cut take it out of him when he isn't able to have some of these bursts that he can sustain past 5 minutes? I guess maybe we'll see if he goes to 45 here in the near future or not. But Mario Bautista is a guy who, when we're speaking about resumes, he was absolutely the stronger resume coming into this fight. There's a reason why he was the A side, why he was the red corner, why he was the higher ranked fighter. He comes from a camp of killers down there at the lab in Arizona. Very well prepared. He's fought some of, as mentioned, some of the best guys out there. But he didn't really have up to this point that real breakout performance, that big finish, that moment where when the lights were the brightest, he went out there and just took something. That was that performance the other night. He gets a 100K performance bonus for going out there and earning that rear naked choke. And again, I think that he really he showed that there is a reason why he should be considered as a potential contender at 135 pounds. Now, he's asking for the Sandhagen rematch. I don't know if that's going to happen. Are there some fun matchups ahead of him in the rankings? Certainly. And I think that beating a contender who was on the rise, someone who had some steam behind their name, and fighting down in the rankings, well, that should hopefully earn him a shot to go vertical now this time, as opposed to defending where he's at in the rankings there. In the co-main event, you had Kyoji Horiguchi take on Amir Albazi, and Kyoji had he broke his hand in the very first round and continued to go out there and just style on Amir Albazi. Hey, I am very high on Kyoji Horiguchi. I think that this dude for a long time has been one of the pound for pound best guys in the world. Again, we talked about it last week. I believe he was 7-1 in his first tour of the UFC. When the division was in flux, leaves, goes, makes a bag in a couple of different places out there, was a world champion in a couple of other major organizations, now returns to the UFC and has looked sensational in his first 2 outings. In Qatar, goes out there and beats the brakes off of Dagestani. The other night against Amir Albazi, one of the, for the last few years, considered top 5, top-ranked flyweights in the world, just completely dominates that fight. No, Horiguchi, he was calling for a title shot, he's calling for some of these top fights in the division. No, he deserves it. He deserves to be in the mix, and especially when we're talking about them trying to capture some more of that Asian market. Well, he's a massive Japanese MMA star. He may not have the shelf life or the long-term potential the way that the UFC has with somebody like Tatsuro Taira, but he's a guy who is championship form right now. He can go fight Joshua Van and win that title right now, today, run them up. Or maybe not today because of the broken hand, but you get my point. You make that fight in 8 weeks, 12 weeks. No, Kyoji Horiguchi would walk out of the octagon with 12 pounds of gold wrapped around his waist if he fought Joshua Van. You can quote me on that. Another couple of fights to talk about. This fight between Hizdan Kuniev taking on Jailton Almeida. Heavyweight titty bumping. Brutal. Absolutely terrible. Speaks to some of the stuff that we said over the last few weeks about the state of the heavyweight division. Those are supposedly 2 top-ranked contenders too, mind you. Mike Olechechuk against Marc-Andre Barrial. These guys had a fight of the night. A couple of middleweights who went out there and pushed the action. I just love Olechechuk's boxing. I think that that's the best part of his game, and he was able to show that off. But you also got to see how tough Barrial is in the process. A couple of other fights to talk about. You had both of the Bash brothers picking up wins, both Javed and Fareed Basharat. But the big one that we want to discuss here, you had the Hanyak, Dustin Jacoby, our friend of the program, one of my just big brothers out there in the fight game. Love the guy to death. Goes out there and earns himself an extra bonus for that finish, picking up a TKO victory over Julius Walker. Unfortunately for Julius, he had to take a lot more damage than he really should have. Dustin dropped him, and you thought that Big Dan was stepping in. Big Dan comes crashing in, runs up, gets all the way up on him. Dustin kind of backs away for a second, thinking that, okay, you just came in to stop the fight after I just elevator shafted him. Well, nope, keep going. Well, all right, here comes the shovel uppercut with him right down here at my hip level, and he's going to have to eat another about 10, 15 shots here that he probably didn't need to eat because it wasn't going to get any better from after he got dropped multiple times. But, yeah, hey, that's the game. It is what it is. Dustin got some flowers from the champ, Alex Poatan Pereira, afterwards, just speaking about how Dustin is one of those longtime guys who's been around forever and deserves everybody's respect and recognition. They fought once upon a time way back in the day in glory, more than 10 plus years ago, a decade plus ago. I just thought that it was awesome to see Alex post directly him watching. It was a shot of Alex watching the TV with Dustin getting a victory. Just love to see that. Maybe that's a little bit from being close to the forest and the trees, however that saying goes, sort of sentiment and statement. But gotta love seeing my guys get some props out there that I feel that they deserve. We're going to move along from that as far as the UFC card goes. Like I say, there's a lot of other fights on the card, but in sake of time, we're going to give you a quick preview of this weekend's action. There is no UFC card this weekend. Just for the record, they're off for Valentine's Day weekend. They'll be back next week with that Strickland and Hernandez card. But this weekend, you do have some fights going on. On Friday the 13th, you have One Championship. One Championship is hosting a card in the historic Lumpini Boxing Stadium over in Bangkok, Thailand. You have Vanilla Thunder Ben Tynan of Denver, who's going to be on the card. This weekend, you also have a Zuffa Boxing card going down on Sunday the 15th. There's no fights on Saturday. So, fellas, unless you got plans, the only thing getting pounded is your pud. In the Zuffa Boxing card, you've got a few fights that are on the schedule. Really and truly, we're not looking at a whole lot of name value here, but you have some highly competitive matchups as far as the records go. I think that it's just something that you're going to have to allow for time to grow. Maybe allow them to build up some stars so that you have some recognized people that you can tune in and really kind of attach yourselves to for Zuffa Boxing. Not really a whole lot that I can give you on the analytical end for these guys. Again, don't really know a whole lot about a lot of them, but I can just tell you that from their record on paper, that it at least looks like they should be some entertaining matchups by the parity that's on, again, on paper. It's only the third show that Zuffa Boxing has had to offer. So time still has to allow for things to blossom and to grow. Gonna move along from that. We've got our Kurtz's message of the week this week. Now, for this week, guys, what are your anchors? What are your sales? What are things, and when I say anchors and sales, there's a couple different ways that you can take this. Well, I take it as, anchors are something that's holding you back and sales are something that's propelling you forward. We're coming up in the next few weeks on a season's change, but it feels like we're already in an early springtime here in Colorado. I mean, it's been super warm. It's been in the 60s. It's been warm. It's been sunny, but
got like 1 week of winter here.
Oh, yeah. We got like 1 week of winter, and it's hard to believe that we're already the second week into February. Like, the year has just flown by. But given that we're basically already halfway into the first quarter, what are the things that, when we talked a few weeks back of having these long-term plans, these goals, these aspirations for the year, what has helped move you towards those? What has pulled you back? Are you taking some objective analysis of your own path and your own journey and having those difficult conversations in the mirror to say, you know what, I am giving a little bit into these temptations or these vices, or I've slacked off with this or that. And on the flip side, are you willing to give yourself the credit for some of the things that you have done? You have been consistent with certain tasks. You have been consistent with the diet or with the hydration, the training, the studying a new skill. Give yourself credit for those things too. The wins have to be recognized as long as the losses on route to achieving those long-term goals. So again, message of the week, what are your anchors? What are your sales? Now we're going to close off the hour by going 3 rounds. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards as always. First round.
Mike Perry and Eddie Alvarez had a rematch in the crowd at BKFC Knucklemania. Your reaction?
Oh, they definitely had a melee at Knucklemania out there in Philadelphia over the weekend. This drew the ire of some people. Phil Rowe, another UFC veteran, said, man, this is kind of lame. Eddie, he was there in Philly by himself. You were with all of your people. But that's one angle, and that's with no context from just the videos that were shared from the crowd. We've had a statement now from each of those two fighters. Reading between the lines from what Mike Perry said, Mike Perry started it. Mike Perry had some words with Eddie's son and Eddie's son's girlfriend. I guess she bumped into him and Eddie said something, and Mike Perry said something, along the lines of watch out. But I imagine it being Mike Perry and him being a little bit lit. He had some choice words that were said and then turns around and realizes, oh, wait, this is a somebody's somebody. Then standing up for his girl, Eddie Alvarez's son says something. Well, Mike says something in return to him. And then Eddie Alvarez is right there also. And Eddie's like, well, you're not going to talk to my son like that. And Mike Perry, quote unquote, said that all Eddie Alvarez did was what any dad would do in that moment. So to me, without him coming out and saying like, yeah, I messed up, I think that was Mike Perry's way of accepting, I guess, responsibility for everything popping off.
Daniel Cormier questions the legitimacy of John Jones' severe arthritis claim. Is DC just a bitter foe, or is he onto something?
I mean, DC's always going to be a bitter foe with John Jones. It doesn't matter how many of these little show opportunities like the Russian Tough or get-togethers or PR moments, these guys are always going to have a certain level of vitriol to them. And Daniel's always probably going to have a little bit more of wild hair up his ass against somebody like John than John will to DC, because John won. John won the fights. And John doesn't necessarily, we've never seen John really accept it. Okay, well, yeah, the second one, it was the no contest. Yeah, pop, whatever, all that. Like, no, John just sees it as victories. John doesn't see the asterisks to anything. These guys are Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. They're Batman and Joker. They're 50 Cent and Ja Rule. Another episode in the 50 Cent Ja Rule beef saga just happened over the weekend with those guys in the plane. If any of you follow any of the pop culture updates or viral videos that have happened across the internet the last few days. DC also came out and said that, well, because the video of John talking about how he's basically done, has severe arthritis, was him having a discussion with a fan outside of the Dirty Boxing show. Well, John didn't know that he was being recorded via Meta glasses. Well, DC said John should have been able to see the little white light thing. He doesn't buy that he didn't know that he was being recorded, that he should have been able to see that that was the case. Should he? Should he have, though? Because especially when you're not looking for it or when you're not expecting it, is that something that you're always 100% on guard or in awareness of? There's also, just take into account from the video, John was underneath the tent canopy, right? And there was the guy who was speaking from outside under it. Well, if that guy's in sunlight or if that guy's in direct like daylight, can you see a tiny little light that's on the edge of those Meta glasses? I don't know if that's something that you would even be able to see if you were looking for it, given what the conditions were. Yes, I understand that DC says that there's nothing that John does or that John puts out there that isn't by a measured approach, that isn't with intent, that he believes that this was John's way of getting this news of the arthritis and some of the injuries that he's dealing with out there to the public. But then in the form that it comes out via this leaked influencer video, John can also come out and dispute it. He can also come out and say, oh, well, I didn't know that I was being recorded or I wasn't expecting for that. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's not an impossible thought for it to happen. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that DC might be a little bit onto something in that John may not be completely done. But I also think that it's not unfair to say that John, who has had a lifetime of combat sports experience, who has competed at the level that he has for the amount of years that he has, I think that it's absolutely ludicrous to think that he's not dealing with some severe chronic pain or some long time lingering issues. DC, let's take a trip back to you yourself when you were at John's age and fighting. Well, you were dealing with back issues. You were dealing with other injuries. And granted, when you had your back surgery after becoming heavyweight champion, it was a couple of years later down the line. But let's not act like you didn't have some severely limiting chronic injuries that impacted your performances at that stage of the game either. I think that it's absolutely asinine to think that somebody who has the time in the saddle for as long as John has isn't dealing with some chronic pain, some arthritic conditions, and just some lagging injuries that over time just became a much bigger hindrance. That was absolutely crazy for me to hear from DC.
Boxing champion Shakur Stevenson has said he's open to boxing Ilia Topuria in a crossover fight. Do you think it will be a good matchup?
From an X's and O's standpoint or from an actual boxing standpoint, I mean, I think that we've seen how this plays out. I think that Ilia could obviously be someone who presents a formidable challenge, given that he is such a ridiculous technician when it comes to boxing. But everybody wants to recreate that Maymac magic. Everyone wants to create that buzz that was had 10 years ago for that incredible money fight. The issue is nobody is of the star power that those two guys were. There's a reason why that fight worked in the way that it did, because you had the bona fide biggest draw and biggest cash cow in the sport of boxing at that time in Floyd Money Mayweather taking on the biggest cash cow and golden goose that MMA has ever seen. MMA's first and only billion-dollar athlete is Conor McGregor. Ilya is an enormous star. He's got worldwide draw power that is, I mean, it's not far off from being one of the best that the game has seen, but nobody has the fellowship the way that Conor did. Nobody does. That's just the fact of the matter. When you look at where the numbers sit, who shows up to the press conferences, who travels to a media opportunity that's shot on the side of a gym, who is doing merchandise numbers, all of those things, when you're factoring in what Conor brought to the table, everybody else pales in comparison. And that's just talking about Ilya, who, again, Ilya is an enormous star in MMA across multiple markets. And Ilya would absolutely be the A side of this draw because, you know, hey, no, all due respect to Shakur Stevenson, one of the most accomplished boxers through this point of his career. When you look at his resume and the titles, the defenses, the weight classes, so on and so forth that he's at, like, he is absolutely one of the best boxers in the world. Not discrediting any of that. But who knows who he is outside of boxing? People who didn't know boxing knew who Floyd Mayweather was. The common sports fan knew who Floyd Mayweather was. Just the common person in most circles throughout the height of his run knew who Floyd Mayweather was. That could have been because of the boxing end, but that also was because of some of his partnerships, some of the strategic alliances, some of the people that he was associated with, some of the controversies that he was embroiled in. Call it for that. You know, the situation, whether it was with Ronda Rousey or he spent time doing a package with the WWE once upon a time with the Big Show, where that expanded his pipeline of viewership and people who knew who he was. There was lots of scenarios that Mayweather was able to grow his awareness. And even, you know, hey, the beef that he had with 50 Cent. We talked about 50 Cent earlier. Well, 50 Cent saying, I'll give you whatever blah, blah, blah donation if you can read this page out of a Harry Potter book. Like, that was something that put attention on Floyd Mayweather. None of those things really fit for any boxer out there to draw the way that Floyd did back then. I mean, you have guys who do have a following of their own sort, like your Garcias, like, you know, even though the best boxer in the world right now who just recently retired, but Bud Crawford. Bud doesn't have that type of fellowship. The big heavyweights like Fury when he was full on and rocking, Anthony Joshua, even Usyk now, none of these guys have that sort of steam the way that Mayweather did at the end of his boxing run. So that all to be said, long story short, yeah, on paper, it's a fun matchup, just like we've had some other fun potential crossovers of boxing and MMA throughout the years. But in terms of economically, feasibly, something that makes it worth it for what is being put on the table from a risk perspective, nah. It's not going to make anywhere near the money or be the draw that May-Mac fight was once upon a time. That wraps it up, though, for us here this week at the MMA Plug. I want to give a big shout-out to my man, Danny Bailey, holding it down for me behind the boards. Also want to give a shout-out to the number 38 as well as the Vimos app and Volo. I'm Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram and on Threads. Give me a follow on TikTok at the Peanut Gallery MMA. Smash that like, share, and subscribe button wherever possible. We'll be back with you next week. Same time, same place. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.